Greetings everybody, this is B Harper from supermaster.com and welcome back to another 32 Favourite Things video. Today I'm going to talk to you about the Xenomorph, one of my most favourite horror movie monsters ever created. And I say that without exaggeration whatsoever. In recent days I have been replaying the very frustrating yet extremely excellent Alien Isolation. Among the other fantastic things that make this game work is the fact that it is able to instill the horror of the Xenomorph in you once again. The reason why I make a point of saying that is that because in recent years the Xenomorph has become more of a brand name and a figurehead in the public consciousness. It is no longer the avatar of nightmares and the avatar of madness. It's more or less taken on the form of trying to ensure fan loyalty to any sort of product that anybody puts out regarding the Alien franchise. And, well, let's face it, Aliens Colonial Marines was a total suckfest, but it ended up being one of the most popular games of the year. It was really badly made, but people still flocked to get this game because they were under the impression that it was canonical to Aliens, like the second movie. Now, I don't know whether or not Gearbox was familiar with the term canon. Like, did they actually know what it means, or did they just use it as a marketing buzzword? We don't know. But thankfully, Alien Isolation corrected that by, once again, going back to basics and making the Xenomorph itself terrifying. Which got me thinking, in the first Alien film, nobody had seen anything like the Xenomorph before. Sure, there were thousands of movie monsters in cinema gone by, but until the Xenomorph turned up, like looking the way it does and behaving the way it does, nobody had even comprehended that. When H.R. Giger made the character, the creature design of the Xenomorph, it was horrifying, but at the same time, deeply erotic. You know, you've probably heard quite a few film analysts say that, that the whole story of Alien is about the dangers and the uncertainty and the horror of sex. Think about it. The alien life cycle starts off as an egg. The egg, on the top part of the egg, it resembles the lips of a vagina. The egg is extremely yonic looking, but from it comes the facehugger. And as we know, the facehugger has a proboscis that it forces down its victim's throat in order to plant the embryo. That is oral rape. You have the facehugger sticking its wang down your throat to make you pregnant. And finally, when the chestburster arrives, it busts out of your body in the most violent and sadistic way possible, and therefore the cycle starts again. Nobody back in 1979 had ever seen anything like that. And it is for very good reason why the Xenomorph and the Alien series has stood the test of time. Now, we may argue that some of the later renditions of the Alien has been less than satisfying, but at the very core, the Xenomorph is a monster that pushes all of our buttons. Why? Because it's familiar but strange at the same time. It really does fulfill what the word alien means. And when I say that, the alien itself is an amalgamation of the masculine and the feminine. Human beings have a tendency to fear and outright despise what they don't understand. With the Xenomorph, if you were to look upon it, you probably wouldn't know what to make of it. It's tall, it's vicious, and it has the head of a phallus. I'm serious. Look at the back of an alien's head, a Xenomorph's head, and it looks like a dick. But the alien moves with very sort of deliberate and very graceful movements. It has a very sort of feminine means of movement. It is very, very tall, but its limbs are very, very thin and almost dainty. you know, were it not for the fact that they have, you know, clawed hands and like sharp teeth and everything. The Xenomorph just affects us on so many levels, because we are looking at sex personified, or rather the dangerous side of sex. And when you break it down, like, the sex is perhaps one of the most enduring and sometimes most taboo subjects that humans can talk about. And that's strange to me, as it may be strange to you. We can show as much violence as we want, you know, in a movie, for example. But as soon as it comes down to, you know, an ambiguous show of sexuality, that's when we tend to sort of, you know, shrink away and not tend to look at it. And that's undoubtedly what H.R. Giger and what Ridley Scott were going for. They wanted to eschew the status quo, because usually the monsters only went after the women. The women were almost always the victim. But the very first victim in Alien was a male. So a male gets orally raped by the facehugger, and he ends up being pregnant to the bastard child of the alien that comes busting out of his body. You know, undoubtedly, a lot of men in the audience probably just shrinked back in fear when they saw that, because they were probably expecting somebody like, I don't know, Sigourney Weaver or Veronica Cartwright being the first, you know, victim of the alien. But no, it was John Hurt's character, and it was such a grotesque death. It's just the entire sequence at the supper was completely unflinching. There was no room to leave it up to the imagination, because that was the crux of the movie. It showed you just how vile the alien is, and yet you can't take your eyes off it. If you remember, like, everybody's reaction, like, after, you know, Kane dies, they're absolutely astounded. They can't talk. Their eyes are like wide open. Their mouths are agape, because they have not seen anything like that before. And needless to say, what the characters felt is what the audience felt. It's a remarkable situation, and one that I don't think has really been replicated since. And again, it all comes back to the fact that the Xenomorph is sex. The Xenomorph is the dark side of sexuality, but the one that we very rarely choose to, you know, examine publicly. And yet here it is on the big screen playing out in front of you, and a part of you wants to look away, but you just cannot. Even if you cover your eyes, you sort of like move your finger away just to examine like a little part of the screen, because you are just so intrigued by this. So in saying that, the Xenomorph to me is frightening due to the fact that it preys on our most sort of basest fears, sexuality as well as disease. That's another point. The Xenomorph is diseased, okay? If it's able to help give birth to, you know, this egg that has, you know, a facehugger in it, there is something wrong with it. The Xenomorph, in a sense, is almost Lovecraftian. And those of you who are familiar with the Cthulhu mythos are able to attest is that the Lovecraft creature basically preys on everything you hold dear. It centers on your deepest, darkest fears, and it amplifies that for you. It's all incredibly sadistic, but it's just so compelling just the same. At least for me, anyway. So what else can I say about the Xenomorph, really? Well, of course you have the Xenomorph's biology. Again, like, it looks like a male, but also it looks female. There's this really cool moment in the Blu-ray commentary of the Alien Director's Cut, of which Ridley Scott and Sigourney Weaver discuss the final sequence in the Narcissus escape craft, when Ripley, you know, dashes into the closet to get dressed in the spacesuit in order to, you know, jettison the alien out. They actually conceived of a moment of which the alien would come up to the door, like, and look through the glass at her while she is getting dressed. Now, the intention was that the alien would show an interest in her. some sort of pseudo-sexual interest. It would have some sort of fascination with the soft pinkness of her skin. It's a very sort of psychosexual situation, and when you think about it, it isn't too, incredible to believe. Based on what we had seen of the Xenomorph and our impressions of it, it wouldn't be too hard to imagine that the Xenomorph has a more human intelligence. Now, that could just come from the fact that the Xenomorph in the first film came from a human host. And as some of you may know, how a Xenomorph looks depends on what species the host was. For example, the Alien 3 came from a dog, and therefore it had more dog-like qualities. The aliens in the second Alien film, Aliens, directed by James Cameron, those were definitely more humanoid because a lot of them came from the terraformers that lived on, Hadley's Hope. So of course quite a lot of them had distinctly human characteristics. Now saying that, when you go back to the fact that the Xenomorph showed some sort of understanding of Ripley in what Scott and Sigourney Weaver talked about, it's very, very compelling. Like, it's disgusting, like a part of you is absolutely disgusted, but you just can't help but entertain the idea that there is something going on between these life forms. Now again, that's not what we got, but if you ask me, it would have been very, very interesting if they were able to include it. So, on that somewhat disgusting yet compelling note, I leave you just with my general thoughts on the Xenomorph. The Xenomorph is a trailblazer. It is amazing, and it came out of the most unlikely source. Now, just a little bit of brief history on the creation of the Xenomorph. So, the Xenomorph was created before H.R. Giger made the design. The Xenomorph was created by Dan O'Bannon, who is no longer with us. And Dan O'Bannon was afflicted with Crohn's disease. Among other things, like Crohn's disease is a very terrible genetic / endocrine disorder, and it wreaks absolute havoc on your body. One of these main things being it's extremely difficult for you to go to the toilet, to pass waste through your body. So it was during a particularly crippling episode of Crohn's while he was on the toilet that O'Bannon came up with the idea of the birth of the chestburster. It's very tragic because the poor guy was suffering through an illness, but I feel we can be thankful for O'Bannon's thoughts because now we have been given his legacy. And if you ask me, I don't think we're going to be seeing the last of the Xenomorph anytime soon. So yes, the Xenomorph rocks, even though it's completely disgusting and vile and wild and out of your dreams. But, good luck trying to keep your eyes off it, because you just can't. After all, sex sells, don't it? Okay guys, I shall bore you later, but in the meantime, please take care. Bye bye.